very good afternoon to you, our cherished listeners. Once again, it's always exciting to come your way every Wednesday with your favorite business development program on radio, Masterclass. Masterclass is powered by Joy Business and brought to you by Goyle. Goyle, they say good energy. Goyle, Yangara, Yendia. It's the 3rd of July today, and I have a few birthday dedications before we start the show. Last week, it was the birthday of one of our favorite resource persons, Dr. Naashele Dodo of Nova Wellness Center. Doc, happy belated birthday to you. It's also the birthday of Pastor Helen Yorson. She is the wife of the resident pastor of KICC Ghana. Pastor Helen, we love you. We celebrate you. It's also the birthday today of Gabi Kudiabo. Gabi, it's also your birthday. Happy birthday to you. Like we always say here on the show, if you want to start something, want to start an endeavor, it's never too late to start. Even if you haven't started, it's the 3rd of July today, exactly 3 days into the 7th month of the year, and we still have a few more months to go. By all means, do start, because it's better to start late than never to start. And as we always say here on the show as a prayer, we say that God bless our homeland Ghana and definitely make our nation great and strong. I have a little bounce in my voice this afternoon because I'm super excited about the discussion that we're going to be having. It's one that's sensitive. It's one that's explosive. It's one that divides opinion. It's one that people get excited about or people get offended about. And today we're going to talk about it on the show, and we're going to be talking about it for the rest of the month of July. And hopefully, if my producer allows it, we'll extend that discussion again into the following month. This program is every Wednesday, Masterclass at 1:15 p.m. and runs all the way through to 2 p.m. here on your superstation Joy 99.7. My name, as always, is Yabanafo, and I'm your host for the show. Just by way of recap, last week we spent time in the studio with an entrepreneur, a young entrepreneur in Ghana by the name of Daniel Odonko. And Daniel essentially was into a business that made shoes right here from Ghana. So this is something that he started from school. I mean, he went to school in tech, and this is something that he started on his own, and it's grown into a business, and that's what we encourage. We can't make all the mistakes ourselves. Life is too short, but we encourage people to do something for themselves. So become employers of waiting to be employed by someone else. Our discussion, and I'm coming to it shortly, for today as we start, is this. It says a sexual harassment in the workplace and its effect on productivity. I know that sexual harassment is a big discussion, but we're going to try and stay focused and steer the discussion towards the effect of sexual harassment on productivity in the workplace. So wherever the workplace is, how does sexual harassment affect productivity in the workplace? Obviously, to be able to do that, we need to be able to understand what it is, because research has shown that while there's a common denominator, which is a harassment, and the fact that there's a sexual innuendo, it has different forms and shapes depending on where you are. So culture plays a role in defining what it is. I mean, depending on where you are, which country you come from, which continent you come from, sexual harassment means slightly different things for different people. In the United States, we've heard about the hashtag #MeToo campaign going on. Some of the things, when you talk to some of the people who are victims, and you notice I've used the word victims and not a gender, because we believe that sexual harassment happens both ways. So that's going to be really exciting as we continue this discussion. The number where you can send your comments to is 0244340437. Surely you do have some information on this discussion, or you know someone who has gone through this before, either as a victim or as one who preyed on other people. Usually you don't get that kind of information, but today we have with us in the studio Mr. Senyo Ajabing. Mr. Senyo Ajabing is a member of the Society for Human Resource Managers. He's also a labor consultant, and he's an HR specialist. Because of the nature of this discussion, we'll be going through a number of resource persons as we discuss, because we want perspective. We don't want a discussion to go in only one direction. So we're going to be having a few people across. We're going to have lawyers, we're going to have HR persons, we're going to have people of renown in society who are authorities in the area of this discussion. Sexual harassment in the workplace and its effect, or its impact, if you like, on productivity. You can begin to send us your comments. At some point in the program, we will open the phone lines. But now, Senyo, you're welcome to the show.
Thank you, Yao.
I'm super excited, and I'm just going to let you go straight to the point, because at some point, I'm sure that our listeners are going to want to be a part of the discussion. So we're going to go through a trajectory of, what it is not, who the victims are, who the predators, if you can call them that, are, the cultural, implications, or how it's even defined in different places. So today we're going to introduce that discussion. But first of all, I'd like my listeners to just get a sneak preview. Who is Senor Ajabin? Very briefly, what school did you go to?
Achimota School.
You went to Achimota, so you're an Akora.
Yes.
Apart from the Black Stars, who won yesterday and made us proud, go Black Stars. Which team do you support football?
Chelsea.
Chelsea. Okay, so the Chelsea guys, your boys in the studio. I like the way you are picking your answers. Okay, so let's go straight to our discussion.
Yeah.
What is sexual harassment? Let's look, if you like, at what the ILO says, what labor law says, what the general definition says, what Wikipedia says, what everybody says. I know there's a sexual innuendo somewhere, and there is an offer, and if you like, an acceptance or not, not somewhere. So talk to us for the next couple of minutes. Let's introduce that discussion, but let's stay focused on its effect in the workplace. Its effect in the workplace. Talk to me, Senor.
Thank you, Yao, and good afternoon to our listeners. Today I want to focus on what sexual harassment is, and then what generally it's constituted of, and then what it is not, and then the indicators of sexual harassment. How do we recognize it when we see it? So, just to introduce the subject matter, sexual harassment is a subject matter that people normally hesitate to talk about, especially openly. It is very prevalent, and yet it is largely unreported. Perhaps it's unreported because people fear victimization, and then it drives them not to report it. Sexual harassment has moved beyond the traditional female victim notion. And currently, sexual harassment can be attributed to cross-gender actions as well as same-sex harassment. So when we say sexual harassment now, we do not mean the gender discrimination of only female victims, but it's across the board. So a man can harass a man, and a woman can harass a woman. A woman can harass a man, and a man can harass a woman. So these are some of the things we're going to be going through. Sexual harassment adversely affects productivity in the workplace. And we have to make this fact because we have to make this point because people who are sexually harassed are anxious. They suffer anxiety. They are psychologically very unstable. So they are not themselves in the workplace, and therefore they cannot be fully available to do their jobs. So every effort must be made to prevent it or deal with it severely when it is uncovered and proven. And the active word there is proven. So what actually is sexual harassment? It is a repeated, unwelcome, offensive, coercive, inappropriate action towards another person. And that action should be in a sexual nature or with sexual intentions. So it's a repeated, unwelcome, offensive, coercive, inappropriate action towards another person, which must be of a sexual nature or should have sexual intentions. So the word here we're looking at is sexual. Anything that moves towards sexuality then can be, and it's unwelcome to the other person, then it can be described as sexual harassment. It is normally perpetrated across the board, either in the workplace, either by a subordinate, a colleague, or a superior. It is also an unwelcome or inappropriate promise of reward in exchange for sexual favors. So if I'm constantly promising you and asking you to give me sex in exchange for something, we call it a quid pro quo harassment. That is sexual harassment. It may be committed directly or indirectly, verbally or non-verbally. It constitutes discrimination, and it is actually gender discrimination. It's abuse and violation of a person's rights to equality and dignity. So this is actually an act against somebody's constitutional rights, and it is that serious. It is considered broadly as violence against victims. So it's also violence. It constitutes gross misconduct in the workplace. So in the workplace, it is seen as gross misconduct. The highest possible misconduct, misconduct that can be ranked in the workplace. Sexual harassment should be, and is one of them. In some instances, it may constitute sexual exploitation under our criminal law. And it's subject to between 5 and 25 years imprisonment.
Wow.
Yes. So what we're discussing here is an extremely serious matter. Mm-hmm. It is very common. Sometimes we even do it without noticing. But yes, it is that serious. So it's about time we really understand what it is. So if we're doing it, we cannot have any excuse of not really knowing what we were doing. So, having said that, let me take you to a case of Shraj versus Professor Awuku novel, decided in 2002, where the High Court indicated 3 things that would constitute sexual harassment. It is often a given a conduct. The conduct must be unwelcome and of sexual nature, detrimentally affecting the work environment. That's the first point. The second one is that to meet that requirement of sexual harassment, it is not necessary that the conduct be overtly sexual, as long as it is gender related, such that it would not be directed at members of the other sex. It may fall within this definition. Okay, so it does not have to be overtly sexual, but once it is directed at the other gender, and normally that action would not be directed at the same gender, then it can constitute sexual harassment. And then finally, the third one is that the unwanted conduct must be shown to be sufficiently severe and persistent to create a hostile environment. And here, let me say that when we go through what actually it is, you will find that one action of maybe touch may not constitute sexual harassment, but it has to be repeated to be sexual harassment. Now let's see what the labor law says about what sexual harassment is, having mentioned what the court has said. So the labor law in section 175 defines sexual harassment as any unwelcome, offensive, or importunate sexual advance or sexual advances or request made by an employer or superior officer or co-worker to a worker, whether the worker is a man or a woman. So these are generally what would say constitutes sexual harassment. But what is it that does not constitute sexual harassment? Let's go through a few of them. For example, sexual harassment is not flirtation. Flirtation is a love language. It does not constitute sexual harassment because it is mutual. Both, it's consensual, and both parties decide to do that. It only becomes harassment if it is one way and the other party finds it offensive. Now, sexual harassment is not rape, even though it can lead to rape. It is in itself not rape. It is also not the general term we call conning. It's not conning. Sexual harassment is not necessarily conning a woman or paying compliments. Of course, at some point, when you show interest in a woman and the woman finds it offensive, you stop. If you continue, it may constitute sexual harassment. It is not a singular trivial behavior or conduct. So when it's single, it's just one trivial action. It will not constitute sexual harassment. To constitute sexual harassment, it has to be repeated. It is not consensual behavior. So if it is liked by the other person, it's not sexual harassment. It is only when it is offensive. Now, it is also not consensual hugging. You know what we call hugging with benefits?
Tell me about it. Tell me about
Hugging
it.
very closely for more than a second is hugging
Hugging on and holding just a little while longer.
exactly. Okay, hugging with benefits. That is not sexual harassment because it's consensual. Once the person pushes you away with the intention of showing you that they do not approve of it, it becomes sexual harassment if you continue. And then again, it is definitely not a welcome touch. If I touch you anywhere and you don't find it offensive, it is not sexual harassment.
I was going to wait and ask this one, but I mean, I can't help being naughty about this one. You know, just going back to that example you gave. And it's a question I will ask in detail when you're done. But is it harassment if, let's say, for example, we have a friendship? You had need yesterday. We're both single. And so you hugged me just a little longer than I expected you to. But I figured, okay, this is a little odd, but you most probably need to talk to somebody, or, you know, you need to hug somebody. And then I need to hug somebody tomorrow, and I'm hugging you, and suddenly you are pushing me away. How does that become harassment?
Of course, at that
I
point...
mean, don't veer off, your trajectory, but
yes.
I'm just slipping that in.
Oh, yes. You see, the first time you hugged, the person didn't show any offense. That's fine. That is an episode that we put aside.
We shelve.
We shelve. The next time you hug the person and the person finds it offensive, the moment you do it again, you repeat it, then it becomes sexual harassment.
Because it has been registered displeasure.
Exactly.
Right.
So any action after displeasure is registered in your words would constitute sexual harassment.
I have a lot of questions for you. I can't wait for you to finish.
So let's look at some of the indicators. And in this one, I would like to separate it into two broad categories. What we call adverse direct treatment. That means that the sexual harassment action is actually physical and directed onto somebody intentionally, right? And the second one is adverse impact, which is indirect. It may be a policy or an intentional action that may result in somebody feeling sexually harassed. So, for example, sexual advances. Let me go through the direct treatment sexual harassment. Sexual advances in any form constitutes sexual harassment. Any unwelcome touch, patting, hitting, groping, fondling, feeling, pressing, smooching, kissing. Once it is offensive to the other party, it is sexual harassment if it is repeated.
Can I look at you and commit sexual harassment?
Yes, because sexual harassment is also nonverbal. So my next point was going to be sexual gestures. If I look at you in a way, seductively, and I wink, you don't like it, but you know what I'm trying to communicate.
Or maybe I had something in my eye. I wasn't even winking at you.
Well, that is your maybe. You see, sexual harassment is not determined by the person who is perpetrating the act. It is the person who is experiencing it and being victimized. So you can say that, well, it was just an innocent look, but the effect it has on the other, if it's interpreted as sexual and you continue doing it and it's registered, a CCTV camera picks you, you are in trouble. You are in violation of sexual harassment. It is any unsavory sexual remarks. And, you know, in our culture, we are very jovial and we make a lot of sexual innuendos and jokes. These if it's offensive to the other party, would constitute sexual harassment. Interestingly, yeah, it looks like some men may not be worried at all about being sexually harassed. But there are men who go through sexual harassment, and it is not funny, right? Even though I know that some men listening to me will say, "Well, the person should come and harass."
Please harass me.
That would not be harassment, okay? Then exposure of a workers of a worker or workers, a group of workers, to consistent pornography in the workplace constitutes sexual harassment. You have a working area with a workstation where a colleague is always, watching pornography in the office.
It's offensive.
It's offensive to other people. Yeah. That is sexual harassment. Posting of sexually explicit drawings in the workplace, which is targeted at a person, using it to tease the person, or it is sexual harassment. And then, so any unwelcome physical, verbal, or non-verbal sexual conduct which is offensive to the other person is sexual harassment.
So let me ask this question right on the back of, and I'm just chipping this in because I want to get a lot of questions out of you. We won't be able to exhaust everything today.
Yeah.
But if posting of inscriptions or images of a sexual nature, wherever they are posted, can constitute harassment, what would you say to the things that people write in cross-gender or mixed-use bathrooms? People do all sorts of graffiti,
yes,
and also things there. And sometimes the statements in some of those places are directed either at a certain gender or at a particular person whose name may sometimes be written. And, for example, they say Kofi Mensah is cheap,
yes,
and they actually write Kofi Mensah's name, and it's on a wall in some washroom somewhere.
It's sexual harassment.
Right.
And that is the next point I'm going to. Where an organization creates a hostile environment for sexual harassment to thrive, that workplace or that organization is liable for sexual harassment or aiding and abetting sexual harassment. So this is where adverse impact comes in. So, for example, an employer, decides to introduce a dress code that causes workers to become sexual targets or prone to sexual harassment by colleagues or customers. That is sexual harassment. But it may not have been intended to be, and that is why we call it adverse impact. The impact of an unintentional action or policy in the workplace that results in exposing people to sexual harassment and also leading to sexual harassment constitutes sexual harassment. Then there is negligent retention. There is known to be someone in the organization who is constantly sexually harassing people. And everybody has talked about it. But management or the organization seems not to do anything about it. And then the person is retained continuously in the workplace to continue doing what that person is doing. It constitutes sexual harassment. And that organization is liable for sexual harassment. Yeah. And then the inaction or failure to act on sexual harassment complaints is also constitutes sexual harassment in terms of an organization being liable for that. Then fostering or encouraging a hostile and sexually explosive work environment is sexual harassment. And then encouraging an environment of loose sexual jokes and comments is also sexual harassment. So you find that in the workplace, an organization has a role to play to prevent, or what we call affirmative action, act in ways to prevent or stop sexual harassment, and act against sexual harassment.
Right. If you've just tuned in, this is Masterclass here on your Superstation Joy 99.7. We're here in the studio. We're spending time with Mr. Senyo Ajabing, who's an HR specialist and a labor consultant. And we're discussing the very sensitive and rather explosive topic of sexual harassment in the workplace and its effect on productivity. Have you been sexually harassed? Do you know somebody who has been? A friend of a friend of a friend. We're having that discussion today. Let's share thoughts. Today we're just spending time to introduce the discussion. We're talking about what it is not, in what forms it manifests itself, and all sorts of things. We want you to be a part of that discussion, so we're going to be opening the phone lines very shortly. Time check in the studio, 13 and 41 minutes past the hour of 1. We will come back right after this.
The masterclass is in session, and you can interact with us via Facebook at Joy Business or at Joy 99.7 FM. And if you tweet, the handle is at Joy 997 FM. Don't forget to hashtag masterclass. You can also send us a text on 1422 across all networks, or join the WhatsApp conversation on 0244 340437, and our facilitators will address your concerns. Attention everyone, class is in progress.
Welcome back to the discussion. This is Masterclass. So do you own any automobile or any vehicle? If you do, here's some good news for you. Goil's new super synthetic 5W20 and 5W30 lubes are the best engine oils for your vehicle. They are specially engineered engine oils which work efficiently on all modern petrol and diesel engines. They clean, they protect, they reduce fuel consumption, they prolong oil change intervals, and they also enhance engine performance right up from when you start till when you switch off. So go to any Goil filling station today and grab your new Goil Super Synthetic 5W20 and 5W30 engine oils for superior vehicle performance. Goil, they say good energy. Goil, Yenara, Yendia. Numbers to call, I'm opening the phone line straight away. 0302-216-541. That's 0302-216-541. Pick up that phone, give us a call. We're focusing on introducing what it is and what it's not. So when you pick up the phone and give us a call, we're going to be doing this for about 3-4 weeks. So let's focus on what it is and what it's not, particularly because there are cultural differences, and sometimes looking at somebody the wrong way in a certain culture or in another country can constitute sexual harassment. But if you did it here in Ghana or in any other place, it wouldn't. I mean, one of the key things, Senor, when we were talking about it, people make comments here in Ghana in office spaces, particularly in office spaces, when their colleagues have dressed very well, okay, and they make comments like, "You look really nice today." Simple statement, but they say it with a certain smile that tells you look like a bowl of porridge. Okay. Sometimes they can make comments like, "In tree," and they say, "And then why are they pal?" Things like that. There are little subtle things that happen. But I have a certain question. The phone lines are open now, so I'm waiting for my first phone call. But would you say that sexual harassment is an attack on one's confidence? I ask that question because in the workplace, when people are harassed, they do not want to be in a place of harassment if they have a choice. So if it's a space, they avoid the space. If it's a person, they avoid the person. If it is an environment, they avoid the environment. If it's a superior, they can't avoid the superior. So, they have to interface reluctantly. Would it be right to say that it results in an attack on one's confidence?
Great.
So self-confidence, if
yes.
you like. Yeah.
So I would expand it to say it's an attack on the person's personality.
Right.
And it's psychologically very, very violent because the person then finds it difficult to act within themselves. So yes, it's more than an attack on a person's personal confidence, but it's an attack on a person's personality.
Right.
So at the end of the day, the person may end up becoming timid, not because the person is not competent or competent, but just because the environment does not allow the person to show forth that competence.
And get redress.
Exactly.
I've got now from Spintex. Now says, really insightful discussion. How does one prove sexual harassment? What evidence is admissible? The victim's verbal allegation, pictures or other people's testimonies, or what?
That's a good question. So there has to be some evidence. And evidence also includes witnesses. So where the action is undertaken in the presence of other people, like something is said, and clearly the victim mentioned that they didn't like it and it continued, and other people can attest to the fact that happened. That's but if it happens between two people, and there doesn't seem to be any witness, then of course it's one person's word against the other. But there are ways that we do workplace investigations that can bring about the possibility of it being evidenced. Then of course it can be adjudged as constituting
Let me ask this
sexual
question,
harassment.
which I'm sure is on the minds of most people who have been abused or who have been victimized or who know people who have been victimized. How do you, in this difficult period worldwide of finding a job, report sexual harassment when you are in clear and present danger of losing your job?
Well,
Sometimes you're the breadwinner of your family. You're the only one who has gone to school successfully and graduated. And, it took grace and mercy for you to get that job. And somebody's harassing you at work. But it's not welcome. But you're also mindful that if you talk about it too much, the final effect is that all the people who depend on you are going to go without support. What's a victim supposed to do? Are there official channels? We talk about whistleblower policies and all of that. In our context today as a country, does it work?
yes, it works if I have evidence. So I come to you the first time looking for a job. You make certain advances. I say I'm not interested in. And then I walk away. But I come again, this time prepared, and I record you. I can file a case against you before SHRAJ or the courts or the National Labour Commission. And that piece of evidence is going to constitute not only an offense of discrimination, what is employment discrimination in our labor law, section 14 of the labor law, but also it will constitute sexual harassment, which is a violation of a constitutional right. And like I said, if, for example, it can be proven that it was sexual exploitation, then you can actually go to jail for it. So what is needed for a statutory body to just make a declaration that you are guilty of sexual harassment, and an organization would have to act on it and discipline you accordingly.
Senor, let me bring this down to our level.
Beautiful.
Okay, it's all well and good that we sit in offices and we sit in air conditioning and we wear suits and we talk about policy and we even pronounce it with policy. But Senor, there are real life situations out
Yes.
there. You come to me for no, you don't come to me. You go to somebody for a job, and the person says, "I want to give you that job. It's yours to take.
But meet
here's
me
the
here."
letter, but have sex with me first."
Yes.
He says it once. He doesn't say it again. You have a choice to make.
Yes.
Let's not even talk about morals. Let's not talk about church and all of that. You have a choice to make. At that point, who is harassing who?
You see, I mentioned...
And I'm trying to make it as practical as possible, and I'm being dispassionate. Please,
Yes.
if you know me in real life, this is
Oh,
it does
yes.
not represent my personal feelings or thoughts. But you keep calling me every day, say, "I want that job." I say, "You know what to do." Now you are harassing me with phone calls.
That is
Who's
not
harassing who?
That is not harassment.
Okay, so talk to me. Who's harassing who?
People are put in a condition to make very hard choices. I began by saying that sexual harassment is very prevalent in our jurisdiction, right? But it is largely unreported.
That's correct.
Unreported because people have to sometimes take the hard decision of seeing it as, say, occupational hazard, because they
Collateral damage.
Yes, because they cannot imagine losing their livelihood. And that is why organizations have to be punished severely where it's proven that they create an environment which is hostile and encourages sexual harassment, because it is the responsibility of not only the state but also state actors such as organizations to make sure that citizens are protected. And that is where we can take the fight to.
Right.
Because the person who is harassing is representing a power, which
That's
is
correct.
an organization.
That's correct.
And the power of acting on behalf of that organization. So if we can take it there, then we can protect the innocent.
Answer this for me. Does harassment still exist beyond the first level of complicity? Complicity here, maybe I'm using the word wrongly, but if you agree the first time and you do it, does it still constitute harassment?
Yes.
How so?
Insofar as I am doing it reluctantly, it's sexual harassment. And if I file a claim and I'm able to prove that the circumstances under which I did it were dire, and I could not have said no, you will be liable for sexual harassment. That one I'm very sure of. But of course, the courts could decide.
Basenio, I know it's a matter for the courts and the examples and all of that. Let's say that I'm a wicked uncle. I keep saying me. Somebody else is a wicked uncle. And your mother is sick and you want money for surgery. Okay. And you come and you say you need 100,000. I say, here's 100,000, but have sex with me first.
It's sexual harassment.
And I walk out of. Listen, you have a choice to make.
But it's sexual harassment.
But you have a choice to make.
You are not supposed to ask that sexual favor.
Okay, so I won't ask. I'll say, here's 100,000, but you know what to do.
Well, what does you know what to do mean?
It means what it means. So let me ask you this question.
Yes.
I mean, I know.
So as soon as I say no, it's sexual harassment, and I can prove that you.
I can have this argument from now to tomorrow morning.
Yeah, sure.
Next question: at what point does flirtation become harassment?
When,
because you talked about flirtation and
yes,
the fact that it doesn't.
It's a love language.
So I come to a new workplace. I see someone, I think that they're really sharp. I like the way they talk. I start to talk with them, start to flirt a little bit. At first you're flirting back and all of that. Then at some point, something twists in your head because you have some problem with maybe, whatever. And then suddenly you think that I'm harassing you. How do I become liable for that?
From the point where it becomes offensive to the other party.
How do I know that? It's in your head.
It's not.
You've been smiling every day. Suddenly I'm harassing you.
Yes. The person has been smiling every day. Today the person has frowned. He doesn't like it. You stop.
Maybe
beyond that is sexual harassment.
I see what you mean. I see what you mean. Okay. Does heightening the discussion on sexual harassment in the workplace create eggshells? Or like an eggshell, like when I say eggshells, I know that if I look at them wrong, they'll say I've harassed them. If I touch them wrong, so I won't even go near them. Does that situation of creating an eggshell situation in the office, can that adversely affect productivity also? You see, if you're overly careful about something that may or may not happen, is it possible for that to also have an effect on productivity?
Well, yes, I concede that it's a possibility. But you see, if we see the implementation and enforcement of sexual harassment policy in the workplace as creating a safe workplace for productivity to thrive, for people to be their best, for people to attain their highest levels of competency and job satisfaction, then we do not care if it is creating eggshells for some people, because then those people do not belong, because they would then be enemies of the workplace.
Okay, I've got Thompson on the line. Thompson is one of our favorite resource persons. Good afternoon, Thompson. You're welcome to Masterclass.
Yeah, good afternoon.
Thompson, do you know someone who has been sexually abused?
Interesting question.
You plead the fifth. You plead the fifth, I know.
I would say no, but I would love to ask a question and then basically make a comment.
Yeah, go ahead,
The
Thompson.
question to Senor would be, what would you advise some companies who have like group WhatsApp pages which tend to be social, and then there is continuous posting of sexually related material, which obviously some members feel uncomfortable with, but they can't get off that group. Relative to, I think you refer to it as adverse impact. What is the relationship? And then secondly, irrespective of the, how do I put this, the realities on ground, for companies, what should be the next step? Some companies are just hearing about this for the first time, and even some policies lack this level of detail or knowledge. What should be the next step for a company relative to what you're talking about?
Thank you so much, Thompson. Please keep listening. Okay, so yeah, go ahead now. Let's see if we can answer his questions.
So, workplace does not necessarily mean where work is done. Workplace can be extended to parties, workshops off site, and also the WhatsApp page, which is a congregation or a network of workers. Okay, that will also be a workplace. So under those circumstances, if it is not stopped, it becomes a hostile environment. And the employer or the admin of that page would have to answer questions to these violations. Once it's offensive to anyone, even one person, it becomes harassment. And every citizen has the same right as everyone else. So as soon as it becomes offensive to them and they are on that page because of work, then it becomes sexual harassment. And this is a dimension even I hadn't considered. Thank you very much. And Thompson, for companies who want to do something about sexual harassment, the first thing you do is to develop a policy. Get an expert to develop a policy for you and train all your workers. Beyond that is enforcement, enforcement, enforcement.
Right. I've got Emmanuel on the line. Emmanuel says, I think he's reacting to the list that you gave. Emmanuel, I'm happy you didn't add your surname because the police would have come for you. He said, if the list of things you gave are sexual harassment, then I've been causing sexual harassment every single day, both in the office. I suppose it comes back to the question of culture.
Yes.
So let's give some guidance. What are some of the things we do that may or may not constitute sexual harassment, but it's unknown to us? We think that it's okay to do.
Great. So anyone is at liberty to interact and communicate with another person. Once you start doing anything, especially if your intentions are sexual or your intentions may be considered sexual, and the person does not, or the person finds it offensive, you just stop there and leave it there. Then you will not expose yourself to sexual harassment, because once you make another repeated action, you have sexually harassed. And when you misconduct, it is just one action, and that can come and haunt you.
Right.
Even if you end up growing up and many years later, it can come back to haunt you.
Like the Kavanaugh case, right?
Exactly.
Okay, this one is from Kobe Nachimota. Kobe says, please ask your resource person, if you work in a place where there are female staff and they dress to expose portions of their body and this makes you uncomfortable, but they refuse to stop, does this constitute sexual harassment?
It is sexual harassment. So the organization has to act against it. Once anyone finds whatever the other is doing offensive, and like the caller is saying, the females have exposed their bodies, so that makes them uncomfortable. That affects their productivity, and it is sexual harassment.
But if they say that, look, I'm not dressing for you, look on your computer, stop looking at me.
No, the workplace must have
It should be sanity.
a code of conduct. So where HR in an organization is not enforcing workplace policy and it creates a hostile environment for anybody, that could be sexual harassment if it is sexually related.
This one is from George in Tessano. George says, men are sexually harassed in equal measure as compared to women. Just that some women have weaponized... George, please slow down. So have weaponized their sexuality against men and often play victim. I've got just about 30 seconds to go. Are there examples, and I'm sure next week we'll continue, examples of men who have been sexually harassed?
Oh, yes, a lot of examples.
In your profession as an HR specialist?
Yes, a lot of examples.
So can you give us a hypothetical example?
A hypothetical example is a female boss that finds a driver or one of subordinates very attractive and constantly call them to their offices and sexually harass them. This is a very, very...
In the office?
Yes, very, very typical case. Yes. So men are really very sexually harassed. And these days, same gender harassments are really occurring.
Wow.
Yes. Where a female boss may see a female subordinate and sexually harass them. And I know of a case where a female subordinate harassed the female boss, but in an environment where immediate action is difficult to take.
Wow.
Yes.
This is exciting. Next week, we have to definitely continue this. This week, we spent time introducing what it was, what it was not,
Yes.
and in what forms it takes. Next week, we're going to be spending a lot more time on case studies of things that have happened and how we can deal with some of these things. This has been Masterclass here on your Superstation. We've been spending time in the studio with Senyo Ajabing, HR specialist and labor consultant, discussing the sensitive topic of sexual harassment in the workplace and its impact on productivity. My name, as always, is Yabana. For next week, we come back on your radio. Do make a date with us. We continue with this discussion. Up next is the news at 2. Thank you for listening and see you same time next week.